I did not cancel the $2.4 billion contract in a fit of pique. I invoked a contractual clause. Those are distinct actions. Wine wasn't spilled, it was delivered. It was approximately 30 minutes into Halberg Infrastructure's charity gala when Evelyn Halberg materialized directly in front of me. The ballroom was a cathedral of glass and gold. 300 titans, analysts, regulators, and board members orbited a single surname. First, she appraised my blazer, then my guest badge, then my face. "The VIP seating is reserved," she stated. "I'm aware," I replied. "Service staff access is via the side corridor." "I'm not service staff." She offered a thin, practiced smile. "Then you are lost." "I am precisely where I need to be." She saw a woman standing where she believed only power belonged. A beat. Not confusion, but calculation. She reached for a passing tray, selected a glass of red wine, and tilted it deliberately over my chest. This was deliberate. Not rage, not accident. Classification. A ripple of gasps. A too hasty laugh. One director's gaze flicked to his phone, as if absolving him. Across the room, the incoming CEO, Daniel Rain, registered the scene and did nothing. I didn't flinch. I didn't wipe the stain. I let the room bear witness. She hadn't insulted me, I thought, as the wine bloomed into the silk of my blouse. She had categorized me. Grant Halberg appeared moments later, his smile faltering when he saw my blazer. "What happened here?" he asked. "I encountered your hospitality," I said evenly. I wondered if this was how they treated strangers in public, how they assessed risk behind closed doors. Cross Meridian Capital had yet to remit a single dollar. That mattered. "This can be contextualized," he continued. "We can clarify intent." Intent? He was still debating motive. Motive wasn't mentioned in the clause. I waited. 1 second. 2. 3. Exactly long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. Then I picked up my phone. "Activate clause 14.2, I stated, voice low, precise, uninflected. Across the table, the floor's posture shifted before anyone else reacted. He knew that phrase operationally. Grant laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You're bluffing." I didn't look at him. "I'm not bluffing," I said. "I'm documenting." On the other end of the line, my general counsel confirmed receipt. "Formal notice drafted. Immediate suspension of capital commitment pending due diligence." "Effective immediately," I added. I ended the call. No drama, no slammed receiver, just silence. For a moment, nothing happened. The room inhaled and held its breath. Grant leaned back, arms crossed. "You're not going to collapse a $2.4 billion structure over optics." His phone vibrated. He didn't need to look. He knew. The principal tranche was suspended. Grant still believed it could be contained, still believed power resided at the head of the table. The cameras continued to record. Capital was no longer a commitment. The question was simple. How long until $2.4 billion vanished? 2 minutes. That's how long it took. Floor's phone vibrated first. A short, muted chime, polished wood. He glanced down. Principal tranche suspended. Grant didn't miss the movement. "It's procedural," he said quickly. "Temporary." Floor didn't respond. A second vibration, longer this time. He looked again. Withdrawal notification executed. The words seemed to drain the color from his face before reaching anyone else. Around the table, other phones began to light up. 1, then 3, then almost all of them. Assistants typing, lawyers calling, investor relations requesting clarifications that no longer existed. On the wall screen behind Grant, a small ticker began to update. Pre-market indicators shift -7%, pause -10. No one spoke for several seconds. Daniel leaned toward me. His voice was low. "Is there any way to recall it?" I didn't take my eyes off the screen. "Contractual clauses don't account for regret." Grant surged to his feet. "This meeting is adjourned." The lead independent director remained seated. "No," he said. "There needs to be a corporate governance discussion." Grant stared at him. "You can't be serious." The director folded his hands. "We've moved past optics." The cameras kept rolling. Red lights blinked. What had begun as transparency now looked like an exposé. Grant's power hadn't disappeared, but it had fractured. Phones continued to vibrate. A quiet kind of panic, an expensive kind, settled over the room. No shouting, no theatrics, just consequence. Capital had withdrawn. The market was reacting. The board would have to decide if they would defend the chairman or the company. Grant found his voice before he found his control. "This is investor activism. Overreach," he said. "A disproportionate response designed to intimidate management." No one nodded. Floor spoke, his eyes not leaving the document. The terms of the clause were met. Grant turned to him. "You agree with this?" "I am stating a fact." One of the directors reopened his agreement folder, this time slowly, deliberately. Clause 14.2. He read aloud. "Documented behavior during negotiations or closing that materially impacts reputational standing may trigger immediate withdrawal." He paused. "No intent requirements," he added. "Consequences suffice." The room felt tighter. Daniel straightened in his chair. "This is larger than an optics issue," he said. His voice was even, but strained. "We were warned." Grant broke before he could stop himself. "Don't meddle, Daniel." That settled it. The shift was imperceptible, but irreversible. One director looked at another. A silent exchange without words. The lead independent director cleared his throat. "We need to go into executive session." Grant's jaw tightened. "I'm the chairman." The response was level. "Not if we vote otherwise." Silence. No one moved. The cameras continued to record. Grant scanned the table for loyalty. Instead, he found calculation. The market was down double digits. Capital had been recalled, and the video record of the previous evening was now being contextualized in real time. This wasn't about a social faux pas anymore. It was about management risk. Grant had lost narrative control. The question was now sharper. Would the board sacrifice stability, or would they sacrifice him? The lead independent director called for a special session. The cameras remained on. No one reached to turn them off. The motion was made without fanfare. Administrative leave for the chairman pending a corporate governance review. Grant laughed, short, disbelieving. You're reacting to market noise, he said. This is panic. No one responded. The director to his left hesitated before raising his hand. Another didn't raise his hand, abstained. That detail mattered. This wasn't a unanimous moral stance. It was calculation. The votes were tallied. The motion passed by the slimmest of margins. Grant's power hadn't crumbled. It had constricted, then snapped. Daniel's impending appointment was paused pending review. The market was down 14% by then. The number appeared on 3 separate screens almost simultaneously. Grant looked at me across the table. You destabilized us. I met his gaze. You destabilized yourselves. No one flinched. No one objected. There were no shouts, no dramatic exits, no security escorting me out. Just the language. Procedure. Recusal. The cameras captured a power transfer in real time. Grant remained seated for a beat longer, as if refusing to stand might preserve something intangible. It didn't. A company doesn't collapse when leverage evaporates. It constricts. It recalculates. It exposes fault lines that were always there. The chairman's seat was empty. Capital had withdrawn. The board was fractured. The question was no longer about culture. It was structural. What does a company look like when leverage evaporates? The market opened at 9:30. By 9:42, the decline ceased being speculative. At market close, shares were down 17%. Not a collapse, a compression. Analysts reacted swiftly. Corporate governance instability, management competence risk, investor withdrawal tied to cultural miscalculation. Credit agencies flagged status reviews within hours. Institutional investors paused secondary commitments. Banking partners requested updated risk models. The capital vacuum wasn't loud, it was measurable. I didn't celebrate. There's nothing celebratory about structural correction, only necessity. By day's end, my phone lit up again. Daniel. I should have said something. I read it twice before replying. You had a microphone. 3 dots appeared, vanished, reappeared, then nothing. Silence is rarely neutral. In boardrooms, it accrues to power. In markets, it assesses risk. In culture, it signals tolerance. The cameras were on, the clause was clear. The numbers had shifted. What hadn't shifted was accountability until it was compelled. The company would survive, most survive, but leverage had moved, power had been recalibrated, and the cost was visible on every screen in the country. The question lingered longer than the drop. Is silence cheaper or more expensive? He requested a meeting 3 weeks later. No cameras, no board, no blinking red microphones in the corner. Just a conference room overlooking a river that flowed more evenly than his stock. Grant arrived alone. No lawyer, no assistant. He didn't sit at the head of the table. That detail didn't escape me. You could have warned me, he said. I did, I replied. When? When she raised the glass. He exhaled through his nose. That was a social oversight. It was a corporate governance event. He looked at me as if I'd translated something he preferred to remain abstract. You truly believe a moment like that justifies structural damage? I believe moments like that expose structural risk. He didn't argue immediately. Instead, he adjusted his cuff. A habit. Control through motion. "Will the capital return?" he finally asked. "Not under your chairmanship." The words weren't sharp. They were final. He leaned back and stared out the window for several seconds. This wasn't about apologies. It wasn't about PR. It was about structure. He understood that now. The board had placed him on administrative leave pending a corporate governance review. Formally, he was still chairman. Functionally, he was not. "You made your point," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "The market did." He didn't look defeated, just recalibrated. Arrogance doesn't disappear when challenged. It reconfigures, or it's removed. The room was quiet as we stood. No handshake, no animosity, just consequence. What costs more, arrogance or recusal? The case was never about the wine. Wine evaporates, stains fade, records archive. What remains is classification. Who belongs, who doesn't? Who is considered influential? Who is considered ornamental? That evening, she saw a woman standing where she believed only power belonged. The commitment on paper was $2.4 billion, structured, phased, tied to 6 years of infrastructure upgrades. Public congratulatory statements were already drafted, but signatures don't move money. Authorization does. And final authorization requires my presence in the room. I don't disperse funds early. I don't disperse funds remotely. And I don't disperse funds based solely on reputation. Clause 14.2 is mid-agreement. Reputational conduct during negotiation, material impact, right to immediate withdrawal. It sounds undramatic when read aloud. That's by design. 2 years ago, I ignored a less significant signal. The chairman of a board mocked a junior employee at a general meeting. I wrote it off as character eccentricities. I closed the deal anyway. She acted accordingly. The board acted accordingly. The market acted accordingly. Sorting is rarely loud. It's quiet, reflexive, cultural. It happens in glances, in pauses, in laughs that come too soon, and in silence. Silence is the most expensive form of consent. The clause didn't punish offense. It ensured structure. Capital is unemotional. It doesn't get bruised. It reallocates. She thought she had sorted me. She sorted her board. She sorted her leverage. The moment the glass tilted, the outcome was set. Not because I was offended, but because I observed. If you demean someone you deem powerless, ultimately you demean your shareholders. Capital doesn't tolerate that. Markets don't debate dignity, they price it. Corporate governance isn't about avoiding awkwardness. It's about preventing predictable risk. What happened in that ballroom was predictable. What happened in the boardroom was procedural. What happened in the market was mathematical. There was no revenge, no spectacle, just consequence. She thought it was a glass of wine. It cost $2.4 billion. It cost us 9 months of crisis management, 3 institutional partners, and a quiet erosion of trust that no return metric has ever fully restored. Arrogance accrues faster than interest. That lesson stuck. By the time I left the gala, the wine had dried, leaving a darker hue on the silk. The video, I knew, was already archived. Later that evening, my phone lit up. Daniel Rain. Sorry about tonight. It wasn't ideal. I watched the typing indicator disappear twice before he sent the message. I replied with 2 words. Noted. Because that's precisely what it was. Not offense, not emotion. Data. I don't deploy capital into cultures I haven't measured. The question wasn't whether I'd been insulted. The question was whether I'd just measured something expensive. The next morning, cameras were already rolling when I entered the boardroom.
Red indicators, 3 angles. Internal broadcast, investor archive, legal transcript. Transparency, they called it. Grant Halberg stood at the head of the table, posture confident, tone rehearsed. Today marks a significant transition, he began. Halberg Infrastructure is entering its next phase of disciplined growth. Disciplined. I took my seat without interrupting the first slide. Management transition talking points. Market confidence. Strategic alignment. Then I spoke. We need to discuss last night. The room stiffened. Grant didn't look at me immediately. A social misunderstanding, he said, adjusting his cuff. Nothing more. Floor, the CFO, lowered his eyes to the folder before him. He didn't turn the page. He didn't need to. Daniel Rain leaned forward. Is this material to the financing? He asked cautiously. Grant answered before I could. No. I didn't correct him. Not yet. The director, 2 seats down from me, opened his agreement folder. Pages rustled. He cleared his throat. Clause 14.2, he read. Reputational conduct during negotiation or closing that materially impacts reputational standing may trigger withdrawal of capital. The room contracted half a degree. Grant gave a short laugh. Standard boilerplate. Floor spoke softly. It was amended at their request. Silence. Several heads turned toward me. I didn't move. I didn't clarify. I didn't confirm. Grant leaned back in his chair. Confidence settled, as if repetition could make it true. We will not jeopardize a $2.4 billion partnership over optics. Optics. I watched him continue, watched him minimize, watched him double down for the camera. I hadn't yet asserted my authority. I hadn't yet disabused him of his assumptions. Sometimes you don't interrupt someone while they're digging. You measure the depth. The question was no longer whether a line had been crossed. The question was whether he would stop digging or ask how deep the hole was. The atmosphere in the room had shifted, but no one had yet named it aloud. Daniel was the one who finally did. Marcus, what precisely is your role in final authorization? He asked it carefully, non-confrontational, not subservient, just precise. Grant answered for me. She represents the capital partner. Represents. I let the word hang between us for a beat, then corrected it. I don't represent the capital partner. Silence. I am the managing partner authorized to release the entire commitment. The recalculation was audible, not dramatic, just mathematical. Floor closed the folder before him. She is the sole signatory on the principal tranche, he confirmed quietly. No one looked at Evelyn. She wasn't in the room. But everyone understood what had transpired the night before. Grant adjusted his posture. Then let's move forward constructively, he said, his tone softening into something resembling negotiation. Constructiveness requires acknowledgement, I replied. He met my gaze. Acknowledgement of what? I didn't raise my voice. You didn't just put guests in an awkward position, I said. You tested a covenant. It hit harder than I intended, or perhaps exactly as I intended. Daniel exhaled slowly. Grant leaned back again, regaining his composure. We will not turn a minor social incident into structural instability, he said. Minor. The cameras continued to record, as did I. No activation yet. No call. Just a room full of people realizing at varying speeds that the person they'd categorized the night before controlled whether 2.4 billion would ever be transferred. The tension peaked, but nothing happened. Because the question was no longer about authority, it was about acknowledgement. Would it follow? Or was the situation about to escalate? Grant laced his hands on the table as if that settled it. We will not destabilize a $2.4 billion partnership over something trivial. Trivial? Daniel shifted in his chair. His mouth parted slightly, then closed again. He looked at me, then at Grant. Perhaps it's not trivial, he said cautiously. Optics, Grant cut him off. It was a social oversight, he said. Nothing more. I watched Daniel retreat into silence. It told me more than his words could have. Intent is not the trigger for the clause, I said. Consequences are. Grant shook his head. You're overstating a social oversight? No, I replied evenly. I'm pricing management risk. Across the table, Floor's phone chimed briefly. He glanced down. Pre-market indicators were already reacting to early whispers. Markets are sensitive to uncertainty, more sensitive to culture than most executives admit. Grant didn't notice, or chose not to. I placed my phone's screen up on the table, not as a threat, but as clarity. No one spoke. The cameras continued to record. I gave them one last chance. Tell me why I should believe this won't happen again, I said, when the cameras are off. Silence settled in layers. Grant leaned back. You're inflating this more than it warrants. No acknowledgement, no correction, no accountability. I turned to Daniel. He met my gaze for half a second, then dropped his eyes to the table. This was the moment. Not the wine, not the clause, the silence. I reached for my phone. If no one else in this room was willing to draw a line, was I? No one answered my question. Grant adjusted his tie. We will not issue a public apology over this, he said. There's nothing to apologize for.